Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Monday. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Want to start by letting you know that Module 3 was due on Friday. If you have not turned that in, please make sure you get that done and turned in as soon as possible. Also, I have put Module 4 on the classwork. I said Module 5. Module 4? Module 3 was due on Friday. Module 4 has been put in the classwork. So make sure that that way you can get a hold to them. Also, if you are picking up materials, paper materials, they are ready for you at the front desk. So make sure you get those as soon as possible and get those turned in to me as soon as possible. I want to start with Module 4, talking about moderate risk areas of driving. And it's spend a little time on the word risk. A risk is that any chance of injury, damage, or loss, any chance whatsoever. There's a certain amount of risk in driving, and you get in a car and the risk actually starts to elevate as you turn on the vehicle. The risk elevates. It's very minute, but it's still there. It is never zero. But as you drive and you actually get into traffic and whatnot, that risk actually starts to grow exponentially. And there are certain things that cause that risk to grow exponentially. One of the things, though, is to understand that there are elements of risk. There are 3 different types of stages, risk stages, I guess you can call them. The first one is called risk assessment. This is understanding that there are things that cause risk to escalate. Certain behaviors that will cause risk to escalate, and certain conditions in which risk will be escalated. Behaviors such as speeding, DUIs, safety belt issues. Those things are behaviors that the driver or and passengers can actually cause the risk to go up. Where there's also certain amounts of risk involved in certain road conditions, such as snow, rain, leaves, weather in general. Those things can actually cause the risk to go up. And your job as a driver is to try to keep the risk as minimal as possible. Your job as a driver is to minimize the risk. It will never be zero, but you can minimize it. You can bring it down based on your behaviors and how quick you're able to find those situations where there are higher risk areas. Okay, and then you have to also understand that there are consequences to increased risk. Understand that the term consequences can be good or bad, but there are for increased risky situations. These consequences can be bad. And so understanding that there are consequences to this increase of risk due to either a behavioral situation or a weather or condition situation. Risk acceptance is where you and your brain actually you see the risk, and then you start thinking to yourself, what is acceptable as far as the amount of risk is acceptable for you. There's certain things that we have to do. We have to, drive the speed limit. We have to stop at all the stop signs and stop lights and things like that. But there's also a certain amount of, okay, well, what's acceptable? Not everybody is able to drive in the snow. Not everyone is able to drive in the pouring rain or at night. So the risk acceptability can be a little different depending on the situation. As far as risk acceptance for myself, I am if it when in doubt, do without kind of person. I always err on the side of caution because I understand the penalties and understand the consequences all too well of taking risks. Keep in mind, though, that one thing that helps you to minimize these risks is that you are searching. You're using that part of the see it method. You're using your eyes to search for these possible situations that could increase risk. The thing is, as risk keeps going up. You have to actually do things to bring it back down. In certain cases, and we'll talk about that in risk compensation. But to minimize risk also, you have to have three things as a driver. You have to have time, space, and visibility. If any of these three are not or have been degraded in any way, if you do not have space between you and another vehicle, if you do not have visibility, if you do not have the time to stop between other vehicles or situations, if any of these have been degraded in any way, your risk will increase. So as these decrease, your risk increases with this with these. Risk compensation is then, of course, you have risk assessment, you have risk acceptance, and then now it's the compensation area. And what this means is that you've seen the risk, it has a certain amount of acceptability. Maybe you decide, I don't want to take this risk. Maybe it could be a car is coming down the road and you think you might have some, how much time do you have to pull out? Are you going to take that risk? But compensation is the actual, you actually making that choice and you adjusting your vehicle, adjusting your behavior so that you minimize the risk even when you're taking the risk. So in this case, the example that is here is this bicyclist. This driver here sees the bicyclist. That's the risk, not accessible. Yeah, the risk assessment. Okay, so he sees them. He sees all the situation, or she sees all the situation. And so this person decides, I'm going to continue on, but so they decided to accept the risk, but they're going to slow down. So now they're compensating. So all of those things happen in your brain. You're recognizing these kinds of situations. Even now, you're starting to make these choices. Can I get out in time? Can I do this in time? Like I said, when in doubt, do without. Always give people plenty of time. If you do not have the time to get out in front of a vehicle, then you're upping that risk of being hit. Now, 3 principles of reducing risk. First of all, never risk more than you can afford to lose. Ladies and gentlemen, you cannot afford to lose your life for something like speeding or something like a DUI or something like driving on ice. You can't afford that risk. That risk is too high. You also do not risk large consequences for just a small reward. The example I give for that one is if you're driving in a car, you're driving when your friends are in a car and you decide to speed. And what do you get for that? What is the reward that you get? Well, you get some, your friends think you're cool. Okay, that's great. But what happens if you lost control of the vehicle? What would happen if a deer popped out in front of you? The consequences do not match the reward that you're getting. The reward you're getting is so small, and you just don't risk that kind of risk that much for that amount of reward. Also, consider your odds in the situation. I don't know about y'all, but I am I'm not a lucky person. I don't play the lottery or any of things. And if anything can go wrong, it'll go wrong with me. And so I consider those odds. If this car could flip, it would be with me, that kind of situation. So consider your odds in the situation. These kind of principles in your head, you just kind of say, maybe I just shouldn't. Now, think about in the city, a driver can make 50 to 60 decisions in a mile. That's a lot of decisions. Think about how many decisions you made this morning when you first got up. You made a decision to get up. You made a decision to maybe eat breakfast, made a decision to take a shower, those things. Keep in mind that your hands and feet will only do what your brain tells it to. So you have to train your brain to make sure that it creates good habits so that if your brain is disengaged for whatever reason, for maybe you're just having that foggy feeling, your hands and feet already know what they're supposed to do. But in order to do this, you have to develop good habits. Habits are easy to make, and they're hard to break. And so if they're good, that's fantastic. But if they're bad, they're really hard to break. Ask anyone who's ever tried to stop biting their nails; they'll tell you it's not an easy task. Um, but by learning how to do these things, learning and reinforcing these habits, one thing you have to do is that good habits and judgment can deteriorate over time. And that's because every now and then a person goes, well, I'm going to, kind of roll through this stop today. No biggie, nobody was here. And then the next day they do it again, no biggie, nobody was there. And there's no negative results. So that habit, that good habit starts to deteriorate. So it's very important, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure that you are practicing good habits. And these habits have to be done every time. We talk about integrity. Integrity is doing what's right when no one's standing over you telling you that I'm watching you, you got to do what's right. I'm watching you. If you got a person that's standing over you, yeah, it's easy to do what's right. But when it's just you, then the choice becomes a little harder. But having the integrity shows that, you know what, every time I come to this, I'm going to do what's right. Every time I see a red light, I'm going to stop. Every time I come, I'm not going to do a rolling. And you actually build that that habit so that your brain kind of disengages from that and you just continue to do the habit. But when you start to see yourself slipping, you just kind of reiterate saying, no, I've got to get back on track. Okay, I'm going to stop with the presentation there. Please be aware that I am still recording. If everyone will give me just a minute so that I can get the attendance. Excuse me. Okay, this is the question that I'm going to pose. Please make sure you put it in the chat. Keep in mind that Module 3 needs to be turned in as soon as possible, and that Module 4 is ready to start to be worked on. The question is this: what is your #1 goal as a driver? And it is something we talked about, I just talked about. Excuse me. Once you have answered, you may leave and have a great day. I'm stopping the recording now that the students have left.